Welcome to one more reading from the Science of Mind Daily Guides. If you're watching our service this morning online, then I'm sure your screen went blank after a while. Actually, it happened a couple of times. And we were having internet issues. However, the service was recorded. So if you missed it, then if you go to our Facebook page or our YouTube page, then you can see, I would say about 98% of it, but there might be 1 or 2 minutes where it was missing. But anyway, so first of all, my apologies on behalf of our spiritual center if you were watching and it just went blank. Secondly, we come to another reading. This one is by Reverend Dr. Edward Viljoen. He's originally from South Africa, and he wrote in the December 2020 edition of the magazine. And I think as an introduction to this, if you remember what was going on in December of 2020, we were in the throes of a major pandemic. It was, well, as you know, pretty severe. So when you hear the reading, just bear that in mind. He actually began that month's readings with a quote from Machona de Loyo that says, "Thank the past for all the lessons it taught, anticipate the future for all the blessings it has in store for you." So thank the past for what went on before, anticipate the future for what good is going to come out of it. And Reverend Viljoen is the former spiritual leader of Centers for Spiritual Living, and he's a longtime senior minister at a pretty large center in Santa Clara, California. So that's kind of the background. So I'm not going to go into any more of that. Although he does say, and bear this in mind, as I said, this was December 2020. The daily guides accompanying the end of one of the more challenging and stressful years many of us have enjoyed, he says, I was inspired in these daily readings to refocus on two central themes of the science of mind philosophy: oneness and kindness. Two ideals we take as a healing balm into the year, and I would say into the day, the week, the month ahead, regardless of how we moved through the past, where we may find ourselves at this moment in time. So as I said, remember when we come to this reading that he's writing in the midst of the pandemic. And he's called it Your Values. First quote is from Idawu Koyenikan, and he's actually a philosopher from the North or South Carolina, one or the other, one of the Carolinas. Oh no, he's actually from Canada. I may be totally screwed up here. Yeah, no, he is from one of the Carolinas. Machona de Loyo is actually a Canadian philosopher. Idawu is actually an author, a leader. He teaches companies how to better themselves. So I got the two of them mixed up for a second. I apologize. And he says, a highly developed value system is like a compass. It serves as a guide to point you in the direction, the right direction, when you're lost. And Ernest Holmes says, a true estimate of real values cannot be built on the shifting sands of tide alone. In the long run, the merciful will obtain mercy. In the long run, we shall reap as we have sown. So in other words, ultimately, what goes around comes around. Maybe in the short term, maybe in the long term, maybe in the very long term. And then Reverend Edward goes on to talk about a famous Indian epic poem. In the great Indian epic poem Ramayana, the hero Rama and the villain Ravana have got a lot in common. They're both learned, they're both rich, and they're both skilled. And someone could ask, What makes the one a god and the other a demon? The answer lies in what they value, for values are the guiding principles of our lives. In this regard, a value is different from a vision. A value is not something that I work to attain. It already exists within me, whereas a vision calls me forward. A value is what determines how I move forward towards that vision. You can learn a lot about your values by looking at your life through other people's eyes. Imagine being introduced at an event by someone who knows you very well. What do they say about the example your life gives to the world? For what can you be counted on? He says, it's one thing to say, I value spiritual living, and it's another thing to have evidence of living a spiritual life that can be witnessed by those who interact with you. How then do you know what your personal values are? If you're uncertain about how to answer that question, try asking close friends how they would describe what you value. Based on their knowledge of you, what do they believe your personal values to be? How they respond will not match your own sense. How you respond may not match your own sense of your values, but it will give you an idea of how you appear in the world. If that matches your values, good. If not, you have the creative power to set new intentions, to embody your values, and to live them. In some retreats I've been to and some workshops that I've attended, this kind of exercise has happened. And it's amazing that how you perceive yourself towards the world isn't always how the world perceives you to be. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But just remember this, you need to be on a pretty good foundation before you can start asking questions like that, because if you're not, and you don't hear what you want to hear, then who knows what's going to happen, right? But it is good to actually go back sometimes and just think, how do I interact with the world? You know, if something comes up, if somebody in the store is being bullied, I mean, not necessarily physically, like if somebody is shouting at one of the checkout clerks, which are getting less and less because we're using more and more electronic stuff, and you can see it's uncalled for, what do? Do you do anything? Do you intervene? Is one of your values making sure that people get treated fairly? I think one of mine is. I think fairness to me is really important. I think everybody should be treated equally well. They should be treated fairly. And just as one example, when I was in the corporate world, I've said this before, I would actually ask the people working for me, who would you miss first, the janitor or the CEO? And for most people, the person who would be missed if they were gone for a week would be the janitor, right? Because you would soon notice things piling up. And sometimes the CEO can be gone for ages and other people fill in and do the work there. But the whole point of me asking them really, and asking myself as well, this is, do you value each and every single person as a worthy human being, irrespective of their place in society? You know, one person who did that was Princess Di. She came from a wealthy family. She came from like kind of a royal background, but she certainly ended up in a royal background. But she treated every person she came across the same, whether it was a leper or it was a ruler. she treated them just the same. And you might say, well, it's pretty easy for her because, you know, people respected her. But the bottom line is she did, and not a lot of people in her position do that. And you've seen examples, and I'm not going to mention any, but a lot of big business leaders don't do that. So the whole point I'm making is this, you know, just sit back sometime and examine what you think your values are, and then you can easily test them by looking at yourself, how you've reacted in a given situation. But the other lesson is this, and I just like Reverend Lisa preaches self-care, which is incredibly important, and I totally agree with her on doing that. I also push one thing, if push is the right word, I emphasize one thing, and that is this, that even when you screw up and you find you've not met your own values, beating yourself up about it doesn't do any good. Correcting any wrong you might have done, yes. Beating yourself up about it doesn't do you any good, doesn't do anybody any good, doesn't do the world any good. So what do? You'll learn from your mistakes, and you say, I'm not going to do that again. And if you do it again, you say, I'm not going to do that again. And you keep trying until you succeed. If at first you don't succeed, try again. You know the old saying. So that's all I got to say about this. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully at 5 o'clock. I've got a busy day, but hopefully I can be back at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And Reverend Lisa, I just mentioned her, she'll be on at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Central Time. We're all talking about Central Time. And then let me see. Yeah, just have a good rest of the weekend. If this is your weekend and it's still got some time left in it, find some time for yourself. Even if it's just a little bit of time, find some time for yourself. Relax a little bit and just enjoy it. So until next time, take care. Namaste.